Welcome to a special programme here on France 24. It's 6 o'clock. We're live here on Friday. Welcome to Worldview on a day France has got a new Prime Minister, the fourth this year. Let's get the headlines tonight. A new Prime Minister for France. Can François Bayrou, a centrist ally of Emmanuel Macron, be the solution to months of political instability? Today's announcement came with its own dramas, with the 73-year-old political veteran summoned to the Elysée meeting this morning, reportedly to be told he wasn't the president's pick for PM after all. Whatever happened between those walls, Monsieur Bayrou was confirmed in the Post shortly after. He's just told reporters that everyone knows how difficult the task will be. And the main objective for the new Prime Minister is to stay in post, at least until elections can be held in the summer. And to get there, passing a budget through Parliament, a critical issue that led to his predecessor, Michel Barnier, being voted out. The fallout of last election means no party or group has a majority. Some of the left-wing coalition, which won most votes, is already critical of the deal. So a new broom sweeps clean here in France. After, that is, every day this week, there have been reports that an announcement would come soon and who would lead the next government. The president, Emmanuel Macron, faced an unenviable task of finding a replacement for Michel Barnier as prime minister because he was forced to resign last week in a vote of no confidence. The third prime minister, Monsieur Barnier, who's been and gone since the start of the year. The reason there is a political headache for President Macron is threefold. Since snap elections in the summer, which he dramatically and suddenly announced in the wake of a far-right victory in the European elections, and he told France the public had the choice to decide its future. The choice wasn't clear. No party, no group won a majority, and there was a three-way split between the left coalition, which had most votes, Mr. Macron's centrists, and the far-right National Rally. So any prime minister has to navigate the point of getting basically voted out, and ideally keep calm and limp on until the summer, when new elections can be held. The choice then, after a week of considering and consulting a Macron ally, this man, the centrist veteran François Bayrou.
I know the difficulty of the situation. The question of debt and deficit is not only a financial problem, but also a moral problem. Because passing on your debts on your children in a country like ours, of mountains and deep roots, is very problematic. In such a grave situation, my policy will be to hide nothing, to neglect nothing, and to leave nothing.
So who is François Bayrou? Let's bring in Mark Perelman, France politics editor for France 24. Great to have you on the programme, Mark. First of all, you've just been listening across to that speech. He spoke of his obsessions. Tell us about what he said.
Well, clearly he acknowledged that the situation was dire, which exactly was the speech of the outgoing Prime Minister Michel Barnier. He said, you know, the debt is still there. It's not because I was thrown out by the motion of no confidence that it vanished. And François Bayrou said, well, the debt and the deficit is what I campaigned for during some presidential run. Everyone was telling me, you're crazy to campaign on this. He didn't succeed. But he says, well, in a way, I've been proven right. And he compared his task to climbing the Himalaya, he used the expression, but he's hoping that he can find a path through those very difficult times. He talked about his obsessions, and especially fulfilling the promise that Emmanuel Macron made back in 2017, at a time when François Bayrou was a decisive backing for the up-and-coming politician and probably helped him get elected, which is essentially breaking the glass wall, as he described it, between the elite and the people, and allowing someone who is born in a poor area, a poor neighborhood, with a different skin color or a different religion, to make it to the top economically, politically, socially. And he said, this is my obsession, and this is something we need to achieve. And he hinted that he was not there just to make a few reforms, minimal reforms, and just navigate. He said, you know, we need to be bold, and I want to be bold. So obviously, this was a speech about, you know, his global vision without going into the details of how he would build a majority, what kind of government he would do, what kind of reforms he would do. But this is the usual stuff for the first speech as you take over after, you know, waiting for many years to become either president or prime minister. François Bayrou, who was education minister, was briefly justice minister under Emmanuel Macron, finally becomes prime minister. But obviously, this is not an easy task. He hopes he'll perform better than Michel Barnier, only 3 months, the shortest tenure ever under the Fifth Republic.
We're going to get into why François Bayrou, what he has that perhaps, if it's possible, what Michel Barnier couldn't do. Let's first go to Matignon. Let's go to the Prime Minister's office. Let's speak to Claire Paquelin, our correspondent there. Claire, great to have you on the programme. You've been up close and personal watching as this happened. Tell us what's been going on there.
Well, certainly Michel Barnier has left Matignon now. He's no longer France's Prime Minister. That is François Bayrou's job now. And what a job it is. He'll be walking a tightrope, a very fine line, as he tries to get the backing of enough members of Parliament in the National Assembly so that he doesn't fall at the first hurdle, that is getting a budget through Parliament and surviving any potential future votes of no confidence. François Bayrou is saying that he's well aware of the difficulty of the task that awaits him. He compared that task, the difficult task, to the Himalayas. So just to give you an idea, a visual idea of how huge, how large, how massive the difficulties facing France are. He and Michel Barnier do see to a certain extent eye to eye on the difficulties facing France when it comes to the deficit and the debt that accompanies that. And François Bayrou said that he would be looking that straight in the eye, eyes wide open. François Bayrou also saying that he had two obsessions. Obsessions is his word. First of all, one was breaking down what he called the glass ceiling or the glass wall between citizens in France and those in power. He said that glass wall was something he wanted to get rid of, and he would try to do that by avoiding using artificial language and speaking in a straight, direct manner to French people. So breaking down that glass wall between citizens and those in power. And another obsession that François Bayrou said he had was to make sure that those who do not necessarily have the right last name, or who are not from the right place or from the right family or from a certain different origin, he said that he would make sure that people across France would have more opportunities, and he would try to level out social mobility. Michel Barnier, very much on first-name terms with François Bayrou. The men are the same age. They come from similar political background. Michel Barnier is more to the right than François Bayrou, but similar political background. There was a warm handover of power as the two men actually addressed each other on first-name terms.
Very interesting. I think only just misses out on being the oldest ever Prime Minister by, 3 months or something like that. Rewind just a few hours.
A few months, yeah.
Yeah, January and April, I think it is. January birthday for Michel Barnier, 73, the oldest, well, now gone, former Prime Minister. Tell us about what was going on in the room at the Elysee this morning. What more do we know? This tense meeting. Le Monde, other newspapers reporting that at one point François Bayrou was brought in and told, "I'm sorry you haven't got the job." He seemed to come out having got the job.
It's been a very interesting week in French politics. We had understood that we would hear who the next Prime Minister was going to be earlier in the week. And then it was Wednesday, then it was going to be Thursday evening, then it was supposed to be Friday morning. In the end, at 12:42 p.m. this afternoon, we got the announcement from the Elysee Palace. And that was after François Bayrou and Emmanuel Macron had met for nearly 2 hours inside the Elysee Palace. And we are not getting as much information as we would like out of that meeting. But what we do know, and we have had confirmation from this now from the Elysee Palace, that it was a, quote, difficult meeting. We do understand, though, that François Bayrou, having been a centrist politician for many, many years now, he put his support behind Emmanuel Macron in 2017 when Macron was trying to be the next president of France. And his support was very important to Emmanuel Macron's rather rapid rise to power in 2017. And so certainly Emmanuel Macron, to an extent, owed something to François Bayrou. Of course, now it's up to François Bayrou to deliver.
I'm just watching Michel Barnier appear to be walking off behind you with a bag on his back and a coat of a man who's famous for walking in the mountains. Couldn't quite make the Himalayas, to use your analogy. Claire, great to talk to you. Talk to you in a short while. The studio here is full. We've got also guests on the line trying to respond, react to the news. François Bayrou, the new Prime Minister, the fourth this year. Let's first hear from Eleanor Carrois, centrist politician, a part of Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party. Great to have you on the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Give me your first thought. Is he the man? Is he your Prime Minister?
We're not looking for the man. We're looking for the right equation, the formula that will allow us to have a government that stays, that allows us to pass a budget, and that is not censored. It doesn't seem that big of a deal, but it is. And we saw that Michel Barnier on paper could have been the man, and it didn't work. So now we need to learn from those mistakes and ensure we make sure we have a project, and then we have a stable government.
So he's a sticking plaster that you need, not a permanent solution.
I hope he is as permanent as it gets in the current circumstances. We have 11 groups at the National Assembly. We've never had such a divided National Assembly. And we've had some groups that were very, very radical in saying we're not going to support anyone that doesn't come from our political family, that have moved from that position. So I see a bit of openness. So maybe he has better circumstances that Barnier had a few weeks or months ago. Let's hope it's the case, because we do need stability in our country.
I remember hearing yesterday Marine Tondelier, the Green leader, saying we want some enthusiasm, momentum, something fresh, something new. Is this it?
Well, you'll have to ask her, but she had said 2 months ago, we want someone who comes from the NFP, her bloc, the leftist bloc, and that's it, and otherwise we'll censor it. She's saying something different today. So when I say there's a bit of openness, moving from, postures to perhaps discussions, that's what I mean, even from her. So let's hope it is the case.
Let's bring in Nathalie Oziol as well. In Montpellier, an MP from the left-wing France Unbowed Party, La France Insoumise. Nathalie, your reaction to the news tonight is your party willing to give Monsieur Bayrou a chance?
Well, thank you for your invitation. So it took a whole week for Emmanuel Macron to appoint someone who is part of a group that has always backed up Macron's politics. So obviously, democracy has now become a detail in Macron's view. And if Barnier came from a group, the right wing, which has 47 MPs. Bayrou comes from a group with 36 MPs. So as you can see, this is the sign of Macron's isolation in the country and of a narrowing around his political line. And this is the opposite of any compromise whatsoever. So this actually justifies not going to the so-called talks with Macron, which has always been just a farce to justify keeping with his politics, sticking to his politics. With Bayrou, we are talking of someone who has always defended the pension reform, who has always defended cuts in expenses, and so who will stick to Macron's politics. This is the opposite of what the French people have voted for last July.
So, democracy is a detail, you say, and yet this is the pick. This is the way the French constitution works. It's up to Emmanuel Macron to pick who should be prime minister, to keep calm and limp on up until maybe elections. That would be the ideal for President Macron in the summer, the earliest point that can be held. But yet, to the question, does he have any support? Do you give him a honeymoon period or not?
No, with the new Popular Front, the left-wing coalition, we were elected, and I was elected on a very clear platform, a very clear program. And it's no secret that we are against and oppose Macron's politics on the pension reform, on the budget, and so on and so forth. So we said that we would lodge another no-confidence motion because Bayrou is just a continuation of Macron's politics, as if the snap elections hadn't taken place. Besides, we are now in a very deep and huge not only economic crisis, but also a political crisis, which has led to a crisis in regime. And so what I say is enough is enough. Macron has done enough damage in France, and he must leave. He must resign, and early presidential elections must take place in the country.
Well, he said he's not going to do that, and he said he wants to represent the country as best as he can. He talks about the arc of the Republic, which he doesn't consider your party to be in. I just wonder whether there was room for compromise at all from François Bayrou. Was there a candidate that you were putting forward that you felt was perhaps closer to the centre to be that point that all three parties and groups could kind of convalesce around?
We have had a common candidate since July, and we have kept on saying, since the French people gave the victory to the New Popular Front, well, the democratic logic is for the New Popular Front to be able to form a government. And Macron should have appointed our candidate, Lucie Gastet, who is a civil servant. Now, he has made it clear he doesn't want to respect either the voice of the people or our demand to him. He has made it this clear, and it took him a whole week to disregard once again the voice of the people and our proposition. So now he must leave once again, and we will see, because yes, he says he will go up to the end of his term, but he's in such a critical situation now that it makes it hard to believe.
Stay with us, Natalie. I want to bring Mark and Eleanor back into this conversation. Mark, just interested in listening to that. Democracy is a detail, says Natalie. And yet, if we look at François Bayrou, perhaps some might say, well, the difference with him and Monsieur Barnier is he has perhaps pivoted towards the left in the past. He supported François Hollande over Nicolas Sarkozy and made an enemy there. Can President Macron and with François Bayrou, can they sort of avoid needing support of La France Insoumise if they can keep the others happy and avoid that no confidence vote?
Well, that's clearly the strategy. I mean, if it's just to do Michel Barnier all over again, it's going to be the same end result. I mean, if they continue, yes. So the strategy is to lure the socialists, maybe the Greens, maybe even the communists, away from this coalition, make it implode. We're already seeing boiling tensions between the leaders of the Socialist Party and the leader of France Insoumise, Jean-Luc Mélenchon. They were essentially throwing mud at each other all week. And so Emmanuel Macron probably thinks François Bayrou could be the right person, if not to bring the socialists. They've already said in a letter today that they will not join the government. And they've said that they'll be very careful watching what will be done on their core issues, inequalities, in the environment, and especially the pension reform. And they say, okay, if François Bayrou commits to not using Article 49.3 of the Constitution, whereby you push a bill through Parliament without a vote, in exchange, they'll consider not voting a motion of no confidence, because when you use Article 49.3 for our viewers, this triggers a motion of no confidence. This is what doomed Michel Barnier using Article 49.3, motion of no confidence, bye-bye after 3 months only. And so if the socialists can be contented by maybe, let's say François Bayrou says, I want to revisit the pension system reform, because he's expressed some reservations. We know he already also had some reservation on a very tough immigration bill that was passed. He eventually accepted, but he has second thoughts. We can assume maybe he will not be in favor of an even tougher bill that was considered by the outgoing Prime Minister. If this makes the socialists happy, at least he can survive. How long? How far? Obviously, he has strong ambitions. He said, I will not be a mediocre Prime Minister. And I'll just add to that contrary to the previous prime ministers of Emmanuel Macron, this is the first time he chooses, he didn't really want it maybe, he hesitated all day long, a heavyweight. François Bayrou, you like him or not, he's a seasoned politician. He's the leader of a party that's unlike Edouard Philippe, unlike Jean Castex, Elisabeth Borne, Gabriel Attal, and even Michel Barnier, who was half retired before he was brought back and came back to our minds because everyone thought after Brexit he had resigned. So François Bayrou, it's a whole different thing. It could also mean that it's going to be more difficult for Emmanuel Macron because François Bayrou is not someone you push around. So we'll have to see if that formula works and if in Parliament he can survive. But obviously, the first test will be the budget at the beginning of next year, and it's going to be a tough one.
Eleanor, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I wanted to actually agree on what you just said.
You don't need to.
I know I do, and you know why? Because he's also someone who comes from the territories. He's been elected locally, but he was around, so he's seen what's happening in the National Assembly and what has happened over the past 2 years with this new configuration I was mentioning earlier, that the fact that we don't have a binary division between a clear majority, and an opposition. And he knows how tough it can get. He's the leader of a party. It's a small party, small group at the National Assembly, and he understands also that because he comes from that small group, he also needs to talk to everyone, and he's been doing that. So, and you know, the other thing that actually gives me hope is that when Michel Barnier was elected, not only the French Unbound, that, you know, I think they'll be unhappy unless it's Jean-Luc Mélenchon that is presented for prime minister. But apart from them, in the left bloc, they're saying, we'll wait and see, which was not their position 3 months ago. So that's a clear division between the NFP's group, and that actually gives them some leeway to build coalitions and to build bridges between the different groups, which is exactly what we need in the political configuration that we have today.
You know him, you've met him in the past. This is, as Mark said, a political heavyweight. Somebody goes back to the Mitterrand government, as Mark was talking about, education minister, then under Chirac as well, go back to 2017, serving as justice minister. Somebody was significant in playing a role for Emmanuel Macron to be president as well. Tell us about him, aside from the policies, the person, what he offers as a leader.
Well, he's been around and he's occupied several positions, and so he has this experience. But
which is policy, but what about personality?
Personality, you know, again, I think it might not be as relevant as we think today. I think what matters is not who he is or who Emmanuel Macron is, but what they can achieve and how they can actually grasp the situation that we have today, how they can understand it and make sure they find something that works. And so I would say, because you're asking me about him, I see him as someone who talks to everyone. And that already is something. When you have a very polarized, very divided political scene, it's good to have someone that talks to everyone. And he's also understood that he actually needs to do more than just talking. He needs to agreeing on a project and a way forward. So he's going to have a really hard task now going forward, because not only does he need to appoint different members of his government, and some have said that they won't participate, others are thinking about it, others pretend to be thinking about it, whatever it is, but he's also going to have to see why he's appointing them for, what is their task, their mission, and that I think is something that is crucial if he wants to succeed.
Natalie, listening to that, what do you think La France Insoumise will do politically now if, as Eleanor says, you know, François Bayrou wants to talk to everybody, and if, as you say, the France Insoumise won't be listening, what happens next for your party?
Well, nobody believes that there will be a single step towards the new Popular Front and towards La France Insoumise, France Unbound. Nobody believes that. Just because, in parliamentary life in France, when a bill is proposed to the National Assembly, the various groups propose amendments, and they are voted or they are not voted. We had proposed a lot of amendments to get to an alternative budget, and these amendments were voted in the last government, under Barnier's government. These amendments, what did he do with them? He took them and put them aside and just went back to his original austerity budget, which is Macron's austerity budget. So no one believes there will be a single step, because there can be no compromise whatsoever. We want a retirement age at 60. We want to raise receipts, tax the rich people, tax the rich fortunes. Macron does not want this whatsoever. He does not want even to hear from it. So what I say, there are two possible positions now. Either you support this illegitimate government, or you oppose it. And the last government lasted only 3 months because the National Rally didn't vote the original no confidence motion we had lodged back in September. So now everyone is in front of their responsibility. Every MP is in front of their responsibility again. As I said, we will vote the no confidence motion. And once again, there is only one person who's responsible for the crisis in France, for the chaos in France. It's the president of the republic himself, because he made it clear he will ignore the result of the snap elections. He made it clear he will appoint whoever pleases him and will apply his politics. So now enough is enough. Macron must leave. He is the problem in France.
Natalie, let me just bring in Mark. We've heard from the centre, we've heard from the left. We haven't talked much about Marine Le Pen, National Rally. What's the political dynamic there between Mr. Bayrou and Marine Le Pen?
There's a personal dynamics. They tend to like each other. Not politically, they don't have anything to do, but there is and the first declarations of Marine Le Pen, she said, I have a good relationship with François Bayrou for several reasons. One of them, and I'm assuming François Bayrou is going to put this forth, is that he's been historically in favor of proportional voting. Why? He had a small party, few MPs, and Marine Le Pen, going back to her Father's Day, have always complained that it was unfair, and so we can assume that this will be something they can agree on. When the prosecution in her legal case said that she would face maybe heavy condemnation, but also ineligibility potentially for the next presidential election, she heard a word of support from François Bayrou, who also faced a similar legal investigation. He was cleared until there is an appeal, but at least, so those are words of support. And also François Bayrou always said that he was in favor of the National Rally being able to participate in presidential election, in which you need the signature, the patronage of 500 local elected official. National Rally always struggled for this. And last time around, François Bayrou actually gave his name for Marine Le Pen. So he gave his signature to Marine Le Pen as a symbol. So obviously, there is something that can work in his favor. This doesn't mean that the National Rally will not decide in the end to pull the trigger eventually like it did with Michel Barnier.
Very interesting, Mark. I must leave it there. Mark Perelmont, thank you, our France politics editor. Also to Eleanor Carrois, Renaissance MP, and also to Nathalie Oziol in the France Unbowed MP. Thank you too.